Sourdough, how did I get into it?
Yes.
Again, we go back to the theme of the toolbox. So suffice it to say that in, I think it was 2016, my marriage was, I don't even want to say falling apart, but because of some discoveries that I made about my ex-husband, which were pretty bad. And I think many women have been through this themselves. I felt my world was going to fall apart. I also felt like, who am I without him? Popular and common themes amongst women in similar situations. And I had put it off for so long until finally I couldn't deal with said situation anymore. And I said, I need something so I can come into my own. I've got to find out who I am. And don't ask me how this happened, but I think it's all part of just allowing things to happen, letting go. That's another big theme I have. I let go, and I found a course on sourdough baking that a very well-known baker in Madrid was giving online. So I'm like, oh, this sounds cool, and I speak Spanish, so I registered for the class, and it changed my life. Oh. I mean, the best friend I talked about in Spain, she took the course with me. That's how I met her. Mm-hmm. The whole thing changed my life. Do you want me to explain anything about sourdough? Let me just explain. So sourdough, it is basically, you're not working with commercial yeast. You're working with the natural bacteria and yeasts that surround you. They become the driving force of how the bread rises in their interactions with flour and water, two very basic elements. And also this was very symbolic and important to me because it was like getting back to the quote unquote basics. Flour and water, how basic is that? There is literally nothing more basic than that. Bread. So, the sourdough, you maintain a starter of flour and water, typically equal parts, and the yeast and bacteria, they eat up the carbs and spit out carbon dioxide, and sugars are created, and that's basically their feeding ground. And anyway, so I'm not going to get into the mechanics of that, but I became so enthusiastic because I was using my hands. I was putting my hands in dough. I was doing something that was very personal to my environment, because my sourdough starter is different than yours, because I have different bacteria and yeast here. They're like all related to me, and they surround me. So this was a very it felt like a good thing to do. And I started baking like crazy. I mean, all the time, every week, and I love to write. So I started writing poetry and stories, and one thing led to another. I had an Instagram account. That's actually how I met my current partner, who's also into sourdough and also writes, and all these strange coincidences. But that's only because I was doing what I love. And since then, I have used sourdough as a way to connect with myself, and it's sort of like my rock. I go to it in every kind of mood. It accepts me for who I am, and I accept it for what it is. And if I screw up, I don't screw up. Like, you could never screw up, because even when you screw up, it's something that you've created and you've learned from it, and it's beautiful, and you can still eat it. And it's a win-win. That's why sourdough is so wonderful, because it's always a win-win, even when it's not a win-win. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it has to do with the toolbox, So the sourdough has helped me acquire a toolbox Um, and it really helped me, not only during my first um, diagnosis of breast cancer, but it helped me the second time around. In fact, I remember specifically after the surgery, I asked the doctor when I could start kneading again. I mean, it's like, that was like my question, because, there's certain, physical restrictions after the mastectomy. And I was concerned with going like this,
Of course, yeah.
which I was able to do within a couple of weeks. And actually, my theory is that it actually helped me. There's some exercises that women do, I know, with like your hands on the wall, you're trying to raise it higher and higher.
So,
But mine, I did all of my exercises with like the dough,
the dough.
literally with my hands in the dough. So it became a very intimate friend.
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, I did a series during the lumpectomy radiation segment of my life, that had to do with the ABCs of breast cancer. And I mean, you could go on my Instagram account and you could see it, but I basically baked a bread. I don't know if it was every day, every other day, but very frequently. And then I wrote about it and my experience. It was very healing for me. So that's my connection with the sourdough. And it's just carried me since, since 2016.
So we're talking about mental health at the same time, right? As we're talking
Yeah. And
about sourdough. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That helped my mental health. And I know how important the mental health piece is, because that's my area, and how important self-care is. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I rave about sourdough all the time, and that's all I write about pretty much, as a form of healing and a form of, figuring out what's in your toolbox and who you are. But it could be anything. It's being an active participant in your life is key, and getting back to the mind bloom again. That is mind bloom. Your mind blooms when you discover your toolbox. All of a sudden you've got all these tools to use, and my tools just happen to be like a scoring blade. And some flour and water. I mean, I mill my own flour, and I've got buckets of grain here, and that's just my thing. But I guess it's taking away the ultimate importance of breasts and putting that importance on what's inside of us. Not to say that what's outside of us is not important, but if there is no harmony between inside and outside, then there's a problem, and we need to find the tools to get everything balanced. So yeah, I find my balance through sourdough all the time.
Yes, you do.
And
Yes, you
yeah.
do. And I'll put the link to your Instagram. It's just so beautiful, and so yummy at the same time. Dangerously.
Not dangerously. I tell people sourdough is so good for you. The bacteria, and yeast the bacteria and the yeast, they pre-digest the carbs. How good is that? I mean, it's also good for people who have some types of intolerances. It's just so healthy. It's so much fun. You could be creative. You could put in raisins, you could put in cinnamon, you could put in basil, you could put in whatever you want, nuts. It's actually giving you agency. And that's the point. When you have agency over who you are and what you do, it makes it easier to weather those very yucky parts. And then you are an active participant in your self-care, which, I don't know, at the end of the day, that's what counts, I think, for a lot of people. when they're involved in their own lives, when it's not just someone telling them what to do or, how you should be, but you saying, no, this is how I want to be, and this is who I am. And that's extremely empowering.
Mhm.
So, yeah, my sourdough story is really about self-empowerment.
Yes, it is.